started. Okay, let's start by saying, so tonight's obviously seminar, we're talking about muscle development. We're going to flip to the screen in a second. There's going to be a lot of information, a lot to kind of get through. I'm not 100% certain how long this is going to take me to waffle through this. There's going to be maybe some things you haven't heard before and some things that maybe you have heard before. But I'm going to try and obviously inform you, give you a little bit more knowledge and a bit more understanding about muscle development, how it applies to you and your training. Okay, so I'm going to just share the screen now. So just give me 2 seconds. Oh, seeing all my slides already. Look at this. Poor management. Okay, where are we? Right, start at the beginning. That's what I wanted to see. Let me just check everything's on the screen. Okay. Right, I'm going to minimize you all. If anybody sees anything in the chat for me, or you get any issues with the seminars we're going through, please by all means speak up, or Dan can see it and he can then inform me. All right, so if you get any issues if we're going through this, just let me know, everybody. Okay, so webinar of the month, muscle development, the fundamentals of building muscle. So we're gonna start by talking, well, I'm gonna give you an introduction what we're gonna talk about. So in this webinar, we're gonna go through some training principles, muscle development, how it applies to CrossFit. I will talk about nutrition, and I will caveat by saying now that I'm no nutrition specialist, but I'm gonna give you some basic knowledge and details of how I've used nutrition in my own training and what I've observed from my clients over the 10-year period. I'll then use my journey as a source of clarity and perspective for everyone at home. And then I will also give you an example program that you could implement today and moving forward in your training for the long term. And then obviously we're going to have some questions and answers. Now we're going to start by talking about this man. So this man is Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he famously said, "The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods ignoring principles is sure to have trouble." So we're talking about principles here. And principles are very, very important when we're developing strength programs or any other kind of endeavor in life. We have to have underlying principles that form our methods. So a principle is a basic universal truth that explains or controls how something works. In physics, it's a rule or law of nature. Now, when we're specifically working with the physical development of humans, we have to be aware that we are working with and against nature. Therefore, it's vital that before we apply methods, we first harness principles above anything. So in short, what I like to say is that nature, to be commanded, must first be obeyed. So we have laws of nature and principles that govern that, and we have to make sure we observe them first before we can then start developing our own methods in whatever field we find ourselves in. So moving on from that, we're going to talk about a myth first, okay? And this is the myth of Milo. And if you're a strength or fitness training connoisseur or someone who is into their health and fitness, maybe you've heard of this before. And this is kind of the myth that every guy, girl listens to when they're first starting strength training. And this is about this guy called Milo, who is a 6th century wrestler. And he's most famously known for lifting a baby calf every day until eventually it became a fully grown bull. And in doing this every day, in turn, increased Milo's muscle mass and therefore his strength, all right? Now, that's a nice myth to kind of get a picture of what strength training is about. But what this is showing you is one of our first principles, which is progressive overload, all right? This is what it looks like in real life, okay? So this is progressive overload, and this is Cassidy Vieta, bodybuilder from the 1970s, and this is him before and after the Colorado experiment. The goal of training, the fundamental goal, is to induce stress on the biomechanical, neurological, and muscular systems of the body. So that's our primary focus, is that we are trying to think about stress to progress. All right, now stress has a few connotations with it, but in the training world, stress is a good thing if it is properly applied. And that's what I'm going to say here. So stress, what it does is disrupts homeostasis. And that's from the Greek, to keep a similar position. So if we disrupt the body's natural equilibrium, we will then apply a stress, and then when it's properly applied to the body will then be forced to adapt. Also, when we've applied that stress, if given appropriate time to recover, i.e. sleep and eat, the body will repair itself and grow back stronger and re-establish a new level of homeostasis. So I want you to think about a suntan, all right? When you go and get a suntan, a lot of people go with that mindset, I need to get as brown as quick as possible. But you know, if you go and do that on day one, you're going to be sunburned, and therefore you aren't going to be able to get a nice suntan because you're going to be too burnt and your body's taken too much stress. So to get a proper suntan, what do? You go out, first day, you maybe do 3 or 4 hours in the sun. You obviously apply lotion. You go back under shade, and obviously overnight, your body adapts to the stress. Okay, and then the next day when you go out, you can go maybe a little bit longer because your body is now your skin has now gone browner and you've adapted to the stress. So over time, you'll develop that suntan. All right, and that's the same thing when it happens with strength training. All right, I just want to try and give you that analogy there for reference. Principle of overload is the king of all training principles as it underpins any training program worth its salt. So if any training program you do, it primarily has to have some form of progressive overload in it for it to be effective. Next, before we move on to another principle, I need to kind of caveat though the progressive overload principle with this idea that a tree cannot grow to the sky. Okay, so the myth of Milo is a very nice kind of analogy for explaining what you could do in your strength training, but you're not going to be able to keep doing that for the rest of your life, i.e. you're not going to be able to keep adding weight to the bar every week, every month for the rest of your life, because then we'd all be squatting over 800 pounds, right? So this is the law of diminishing returns. Nothing lasts forever, all right? Nothing lasts forever. And if our goal is to keep driving accelerated adaptation and the hypertrophy, as I say, flowing like a fine wine, we will eventually need to change the way we apply stress to the body, i.e. the methods that we use. And whatever methods we apply, they again must be rooted in sound principles of training. Remember what I said to you at the start, Ralph Waldo Emerson, we must think about principles before we think about methods. People who come into training from day one as a novice on a linear progression of basic strength program is where you will make the best progress. First 16 to 18 months of your training journey are pretty much the glory days, the golden days. It's when you then be moving towards that intermediate to advanced lifter stage where it becomes a lot harder to make those gains, all right? And that's where genetics comes in. It's that proverbial elephant in the room, is that while we're all the same, we are all different. Genetically, we have different geographical opportunities and obviously not only bodily as well. So genetics is something that will dictate your level of adaptation. So it's very important, people, that you can only actually compare yourself to you, all right? A lot of people try to compare themselves to other people. You can only compare yourself to you and what your genetic potential is. And obviously, you won't know what your genetic potential is until you try. So it's very important that whatever you've got, you try and make the best of it. Okay, people? So it's very important for you to understand that, yeah, progressive overload is great, but I'm not a tree. Well, your tree cannot go to the sky is what I'm saying. Moving on. We're going to get a little bit sciencey. I'm going to talk about the SAID principles. So try and hang with me here. I'll try and keep this as succinct as I can. I'm just going to show you an image to start with, and hopefully you can see that on your screen. I just want you to look at that image to start with. I want you to draw your eyes to the left side where it says muscle fiber. I want you to have a little look at that. So that muscle fiber and that little diagram is pretty much what you have in your body. You've got hundreds of thousands of these muscle fibers, and in those red dots in the middle, they are called myofibrils, and that's what every muscle fiber has inside of it. Some people have more, some people have less, depending on genetics. Now, that's all I want you to think about for the minute. I'm now going to talk to you about what the SAID principle means, and that means specific adaptations to imposed demands, all right? So if we're talking about muscular development, the specific rep range we apply to the body will elicit a specific adaptation. So Move your eyes now to the right side of the image where it says myofibrillar hypertrophy. And this is 4 to 7 reps, okay? So this is called myofibrillar hypertrophy. And this is muscular strength, force production, and protection. Professional athletes make their careers harnessing, developing these rep ranges, okay? Because this is where we develop speed, power, and all that good stuff. In the middle, you've got what's called sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, okay? And this is increased cross-sectional area of the muscle. I'm not going to read all that bit in the middle, but you can in your own time. But primarily, bodybuilders requiring size and athletes requiring armor for their sport will train in these rep ranges. Very important to understand that this is not functional tissue, okay? So if you're looking at a diagram, the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, you can see there's some myofibrils in there, the 4 red dots, and there's a whole lot of white space around that muscle fiber. That is going to show cross-sectional size increase. Whereas conversely, myofibrillar hypertrophy, lots of red dots, minimal plasma, minimal white outside the muscle. That means there's going to be more muscular strength and force, speed, power, all that good stuff, okay? I hope that's kind of gone on board. I'm going to try and give you an example now of how this looks in the wild. So 2 extremes, 2 examples of the said principle in action. Brian Johnson, Ronnie Coleman. Myofibrillar hypertrophy, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Now, this is not to say that Ronnie Coleman isn't strong, but you can see how different adaptations have been required by different athletes for their sport. So Brian Johnson, he requires to be powerful, speed. He needs to move from point A to point B as fast as he can. So he's packing a punch, okay? He's going to have that myofibrillar density in his muscle fibers. Whereas Coleman, on an example, he's obviously going to be strong. He's going to have some myofibrillar hypertrophy in there, but his goal is obviously the bodybuilding, and he's trying to, it's aesthetic. His sport is about showing muscle mass and how much muscle mass I can develop. So he needed to harness that 8 to 12 rep range. Cool. I hope that's kind of gone in. Let's get a little pause for a minute as we move to the next slide. Okay, so how this could apply to CrossFit, all right? And it's quite nuanced, but this is how I see it. We're just going to put a picture up here of Rob Orlando. He's he's a strongman athlete who came to CrossFit, okay? And he did very well considering he came from a strongman background. I just want to give you a little history lesson, okay? So until recently, using traditional old school methods of bodybuilding to supplement CrossFit training was quite frankly frowned upon, all right? Curls were not in fashion, okay? And but subsequently, because of this lack of development or moving away from these old school methods, we started to see a lot of injuries and muscle imbalance happen within the community. Women started to develop massive traps of no mid-back, and men were tearing bicep tendons if you saw the infamous regional stuff. And everyone knew someone with a shoulder, hip, or back issue. Now, I'm going to talk about that a little bit further, but going back to sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, as I said, it is not functional tissue, but if we know how to leverage it, we can elicit strength and performance gains. So for example, if I build a bigger back rack by increasing my pull-up capacity, so if I take my pull-ups from 0 to 12, I will increase the back rack density on my back. I'll increase the cross-sectional size of the musculature across my back, and therefore I can support heavier loads on my back and therefore get stronger. The stronger you are, the more power we're able to elicit, not only maximally, think 1 to 5 RMs, but sub-maximally too, think Metcons, cycling, any other sport that requires sub-maximal effort, which for all you CrossFitters means faster Fran times. Okay, so this is a way of how we can harness that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. I want you to get away from the association when you think bodybuilding, okay? A lot of people have these associations. I'm not saying you need to train or look like a bodybuilder, because that's not what the sport of CrossFit requires. But I am saying you need to do some bodybuilding for your long-term journey, okay? Cool. Now, talking about injuries and imbalances, this part is very important, and this is the other keystone to developing. The other keystone for muscular development and how to keep you moving forward. Two images. You've got the elevator, we've got Mike Mensa, famous bodybuilder on the right. We'll talk about those in a second. I just want you to cast your eyes over those. And we're going to talk about primal movements. So primal is what I call them, or you could say fundamental movement patterns. And this is fundamental movements that human beings can do. So upper body primals, we've got vertical push, think push-up. Vertical pull, think pull-up. Horizontal push, think bench press. Horizontal pull, think barbell row. Lower body primals, squat hinge, so we're thinking deadlift, squat. Lunges of all different variations, step-ups of all different variations. And then our full body primals, we're looking at carries, farmer's carries, sandbag carries. Great functional movements, all right? Now, the initial failings with the CrossFit methodology was the bias to predominantly frontal plane movements, i.e. everything was up. So if you think about Fran, 21-15-9, pull-ups and thrusters, everything is up, okay? There's no away and towards, there's no stabilizing, there's no stepping up, there's no lunging. And predominantly a lot of CrossFit a lot of CrossFit workouts were focused predominantly on that frontal plane movement. And coupled with this clock on, mind off approach, i.e. 3, 2, 1, go, movement goes out the window, we started to see poor execution of primal movements. And as a result, those initial years led to a huge amount of imbalances and subsequent injuries. You are talking to the man who went through that. What we found over time was that improper execution of your primals will compound over time. So when I get all the coaches will get you doing basic primal movements, dead bugs, all that kind of stuff. We are trying to hammer you to get better at your primal movement patterns, all right? If you poorly execute primals, this will result in muscular imbalances and will actually inhibit the transfer of your training to the sporting arena or to your improvement in your performance. Muscle imbalances create short muscle bellies. So the takeaway here is a short muscle is a weak muscle. The body doesn't care that you do CrossFit or any other sport for that matter. All it wants is balance. Remember homeostasis. Every sport will develop its own unique deficiencies, but a prudent and practical strength and conditioning program is the proverbial vessel that will take you to your sport. Not only should it enhance your performance, but it should also attack and address any limiting factors the individual may have. And kind of a side note here, the problem with the basic movement patterns and people's, I wouldn't say lack of engagement, but people not seeing kind of the merit in them is that they're not sexy, okay? But while sexy sells, I'm gonna say there is beauty in the basics. When you start getting away from the basics, things generally start going wrong, all right? When we start moving towards the circus tricks first, I wanna get a kipping muscle up first, I wanna get my kipping, and I don't have any foundation, I am pull-ups, you name it, we've always hammered that to you, we will start seeing those issues start cropping up, okay? Now, the two images I talked at the start was this elevator idea, and this is kind of an analogy I use. So elevator shaft analogy, do you want to reach the next floor? So if you imagine an elevator is a perfectly square box, and for it to go up and down that shaft, it has to stay perfectly square. Imagine you are the elevator and the shaft is your performance and you reaching the pinnacle of your performance or reaching your genetic potential. If you start training in that predominantly frontal plane movement, let's just use CrossFit example because we will understand that. What will start happening over time is the box will start changing into a circle, or maybe one side of it will start turning oblong, or it'll push out into the shaft. And then what happens is you will not go up the shaft. And what's that? That is injury, and that is loss of performance and loss of progress. Okay, so that's the analogy I like to use. Now, Mike Mentz over here on the right, it gives you a good demonstration of muscle balance, okay? And this is what you can take from bodybuilding is that the bodybuilders are primarily focused on creating balance and symmetry, all right? So they're making sure everything is in proportion. And this is what we try to tell you in classes, or when I do sort of bodybuilding stuff, I say, find your muscles, okay? Posing isn't just for bodybuilders, all right? A lot of bodybuilders are great because they can actually involuntary flex single muscle groups. So like they can flex their lats, they can flex their biceps. A lot of people don't know where their lats are, can't find them, don't know where their quads are, inside of the hamstring, all that kind of stuff. So bodybuilding is a great way for you to find muscle groups. And that was quite a big slide, people, so I hope that's making sense so far. We're now moving towards individuality. I think we're about over halfway there and we're doing great. So I said this at the start, we're all the same, but we're all different. Here's a group of sprinters, ladies, I'm not sure what they're wearing, 100, 200 meters, but regardless of the sport they're doing, these are all individuals, okay? Each athlete is a unique individual, differing psychologically, physiologically, and anatomically. As coaches, we aim to apply methods that will give the same results to a collective group, okay? Methods, we use methods, all right? We understand acutely that no two individuals are the same. Two athletes with similar performance levels following the same training can yield very and sometimes vastly different results. In regards to muscle imbalances, this will also happen. We will see that difference from individual to individual, but as coaches, we see common themes crop up time after time. Lack of posterior chain, training programs biasing one movement plane. Maybe they've come from a different coach and they've been doing something the same for years. No base level of strength, lack of primal proficiency, and also major surgeries to minor injuries that they've had past or present, all right? So this is where we can start to see those themes. But while your coach is an important part of the puzzle, going back to that individuality piece, you need to own your training. Individuality and personal responsibility go hand in hand. An athlete serious about their training should start to understand their own body. It's not enough anymore for your coach to tell you what to do. He or she is the vessel, all right? And when you think of is the Karate Kid, okay? Mr. Miyagi, Daniel-san, all right? He's the mentor, he's the student. There's that relationship they have, but primarily it's up to Daniel-san to take what he's learning and put it into practice, okay? This is another principle now, okay? So time under tension, or what we call tempo training. This is not going to be too long, but we will go over this. There's some old school images, bodybuilding. I like old school bodybuilding images. Time under tension refers to the amount of time a muscle is held under tension or strain during an exercise set, okay? You might have seen it on the board sometimes. It says like 3x01. Okay, then that's just telling you how long you're going to be lifting the weight for. Primary thing you need to remember here is weightlifting, not weight throwing. All your body knows is applied tension. So save your explosive movements for your Metcons, where you're trying to obviously increase your, do better times or move more weight, etc. Ollie lifting, plyometrics, or drop kicking that dude trying to steal your car. We're not applying momentum to traditional bodybuilding movements. So when we're focusing on muscular development, people, we are not looking for you to move weight fast. But with that being said, if your sport does require speed, then we're moving weights out of the hole, like the squat, for example, we will move fast. Train fast, be fast, train slow, be slow. But we will focus on types of muscle contraction, okay? So even though if your sport requires you to move fast, we will focus on that eccentric, that negative, so that lowering of the weight to get that time under tension, all right? So you've got three different types of muscle contraction: concentric, eccentric, isometric. Think a bicep curl. The concentric is the lifting of the weight. The eccentric is the lowering of the weight, taking the weight back down, and the isometric is the holding, so you could hold it at any point during the lift, all right? So those are three different types of muscle contraction. And in muscle development, we can play around with those different contractions, adding time, stress, and all that kind of stuff. All right, so we've got about, I think, 3 or 4 more slides. And I've done a lot of information. And now we're going to go on to some nutrition, some basics. And at the start, I told you people that I'm no way a nutrition expert, but you know, I've been doing this a few years now, so I understand some basic concepts. Look at that plate of food, lovely. Now, calorie surplus. If you're training in an effective manner and your goal is to put on muscle, aka more meat on the meat suit, then you need to make sure your fuel is matching your intentions. As a rough starting point, you're looking at 17 to 20 calories per pound of body weight, excuse me. Now, I'm going to give you a list of what to eat and what not to eat. It might be controversial, just hear me out to start with. Eat with abandon. Meat, fowl, fish, seafood, eggs, vegetables, roots, tubers, bulbs, herbs, spices, animal fats, olives, and olive oil, avocados, coconut, and dairy. All right. Dairy is a great area. that requires personal consideration. While a powerful tool in strength and weight gain category, you should be smart. Individuals with autoimmune disease should avoid dairy products of any kind. Limit nuts, seeds, fruits, oats, and white rice. I kind of call this mantra, earn your carbs. If you're weight training 4 or 5 times a week, hitting Metcons or whatever you're doing, you are earning your carbs, all right? When I say limit, this doesn't mean eliminate, okay? I think people find that connotation to say limit and go, oh, I can't eat any of that. No, you can eat that stuff, but you need to be smart with it. If you can tolerate oats without adverse effects, put them in rotation. Like oats, white rice is pure glucose and generally is very agreeable to the masses. How long have people been eating white rice for? Avoid wheat, barley, rice, soy, legumes, veggie nut, and seed oils. Why? Immune function. These food groups have a really systemic problem on immune function. Immune function is king and is directly linked to the gastrointestinal tract, aka the gut. So if your GI is sick, if your gut is sick, or if you're constantly battling off illness, whatever it is, then you're not at optimal immune function. And that means that you will not have optimal immune function, it will not occur, and therefore it will actually inhibit your ability to train at higher intensities. But very important, I'm saying at the bottom there are no good foods or bad foods, only foods that promote gut health. Some of you might be able to eat wheat, barley, rice, soy, legumes, and veggie nut and seed oils because your immune function's fine. Some of you may not. This is the process of you figuring out what foods cause you GI stress. That's the fundamental thing you need to think about when you're putting food in your body and how your body responds to it. So ultimately, never compromise food quality and nutrient density in the name of some magic macro number. I'm a big proponent of people getting back to using their hands and instinctive eating over technology first, okay? I think we become too dependent sometimes on technology as our guiding light. You can measure and weigh your food with your hands. For example, you eat 3 meals a day. I'm gonna have a palm-sized piece of protein at every meal. Look at your palm, that's the size of protein you're gonna have at your meal. Carbs, put your fists together. 1 carb for 1 fist for non-training day, 2 fists for training days, okay, as a rule. Veggies, you can obviously eat as much as you need to. I'll talk about those in a second. And when you're measuring out fat, think about using your thumb. Measure it with the thumb. Guidelines for food selection. High nutrient density, reduce inflammation over that time period, promote gut health, and ultimately improve digestion. Roy G. Biv stands for eat the colors of the rainbow. So when you eat in your veggies, think red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. All right, those are the types of colors you want to be eating. Variety of vegetables. A lot of people just stick to kind of green vegetables. You need to make sure you're getting plenty of colors across your diet. That's my diet lecture. Hope it went well. Okay. We've got through the majority of it. I'm now going to talk about my journey as a source of clarity and perspective and showing you what I've done over this 20 years now I've been training. So this is my first CrossFit competition back in 2000. Oh, God. It was a long time ago, let's just say that. And there you go, 2008, 82 kilos, okay? And that was the first time we got introduced to prowlers, and that was a horrific experience. And then this is me now, 2020, last year, about 110 kilos. So you can see the difference of what's happened over that time. There's been many mistakes, etc. I've made during that time, and injury was one of them, all right? But we learn from our mistakes, right? Again, progressive overload in an 18-month period. So here's me in about 2018. You can see this, I've got a little bit more aesthetics. I'm a lot leaner. About 92 kilos here at the time. And then this is me, again, 2020, about 18 months, a little bit over maybe, etc. Obviously, there's a change in aesthetics, but you can see obviously quite clearly the difference in muscle mass left to right. Now, obviously, and just remember, as I was saying to you at the start, this is not necessarily functional tissue, okay? It depends on what your training goals are and what you're trying to get out of your training. I was primarily at this time focusing on, well, you know what? I want to try some bodybuilding to see what happens. Balancing the box. Excuse me, something's happening on Zoom here. Here we go. This is a good example of muscle imbalances and muscle development. Okay, so if you look on this left picture here, This is me before I started doing kind of some of this stuff. Look at my lats, all right? Look at my kind of traps, my underneath my arms, tops of the shoulders. Then conversely, look on the opposite side of the picture. You can see now I've got lat development. I can start finding my lats better. I've also got more rear delts, more bicep, more tricep. So I'm starting to build more muscle groups, okay? Now, if I then took what I got here, started focusing on a different training method, maybe towards CrossFit or maybe towards power, speed or something like that, I can then utilize and harness that muscle I've gained and turn it into, you know, more contractile, more production force. Where are we going next? Okay, your sample muscle building program I'm going to give you, people. This is the last slide, all right? So thank you so much for listening and staying attentive. This is something you can do once a week. You can split up how you want. It's up to you. The main thing is just doing this stuff. Carries. I can't say enough how much people need to do more carries. 400-meter carries, 5-minute carries, any variation. Pick up a sandbag, pick up 2 dumbbells, kettlebells, put them overhead, single arm, front rack, you name it. Carries are an extremely effective way of ironing out weaknesses and muscle imbalances, more than you give it credit for. You could do then 3 sets of max effort lunges, Bulgarian split squats, left and right. Take a minute's rest between if you need to. 3 sets of 12 to 15 lat pull downs, close grip and wide grip, or any row variation will do, so barbell row, dumbbell row, etc. Superset, a max effort dumbbell chest fly set with max push-ups. That's always fun for the chest. And primarily, people, what we're thinking about is muscle groups. And just remember that as we're going through. So lunges, I'm thinking about legs, glutes, hamstrings, inside the leg. Lat pull downs, I'm thinking about back, right, developing those lats. Chest, bicep, short head of the bicep, etc. 3 sets, superset, max effort, side delt flies and rear delt flies, very important one. And obviously, if you have got any questions on these movements, you can ask me at the end and obviously ask me in the gym. But we definitely need to focus more on the back side of the body as opposed to the front. Remember, back for go, front for show. Lateral raises, front raises, shoulder health stuff, landmine twists and lying leg raises, a little bit of core trunk action there. Very important to do some rotation stuff. You know, primarily we developed obliques on the muscles on your side of your body to stop your spine from snapping, all right? But also, I heard a quote from a guy who said, life-saving and ass-kicking are done in the transverse plane, i.e. rotation-based movements, right? So think about boxers, think about fighters. They're extremely powerful because they use a lot of rotation, etc. All right? All movements can be substituted for machine-based movements. Do not be afraid of using machines, people, at a commercial gym. It is your ally in your quest for longevity. Pulley and cable systems allow for seriously effective time under tension and, all importantly, you finding your muscles. All right? All right. I'm bored of my voice. I'm sure you're bored of mine. You are. We're going to go to some questions and answers. Thank you for listening. I'm going to flip back to me now. 2 seconds here. There I am. Hi. Okay, people. Questions. Let's go. Anything? When would you say 1 to 3? Yeah, okay. So 1 to 3 rep ranges, Ash, is primarily central nervous system efficiency. So testing wise, that's when I would use it. Okay. So primarily what we do a lot of times in our programs here is that we will make you do rep ranges of 5. So we'll follow a 5 cycle and then we'll basically work it towards you then testing maybe a 3 rep max, 1 rep max, 2 rep max. For novice lifters and people just coming to the game, 1 and 3 rep maxes are a really bad idea, okay? Because people haven't got the neurological and biomechanical efficiency to effectively show a 1 to 3 rep max. Those people who have been doing training for a long time and who've been training for more than 2 years, 1 to 3 rep ranges is when I start testing people. That makes sense. Cool. Any other questions? Right, oh, there we go. I think we're done by the sounds of it. Oh, also, did your gymnastics take a toll when you bulked up? Yeah, okay, Ash. So this is what I was saying about non-functional tissue. Now, I've never been the biggest gymnastics guy. We can all know that. But I've always done basic gymnastics. But of course, as I got heavier, my gymnastics started taking a massive nosedive. All right. Gymnastics training is also another great way of plugging holes in your imbalances. When you look at a gymnast, especially professional top level gymnasts, they're pretty much like bodybuilders. They've got such symmetry across their shoulders. You know, to be able to hold an iron cross is something else to behold, not only just from a strength basis, but also knowing how to contract certain muscle groups. Right. So yeah, my gymnastics definitely took a toll, but that's the sacrifice you make, right? It depends what you're training for at the end of the
day. Hey, I have a question. How would you recommend? Oh, sorry. God.
No, you can show it. Go for it.
How would you recommend doing your kind of bodybuilding and strength training focus around CrossFit? Like, would you break it down into doing X number of CrossFit sessions a week and X number of strength training sessions a week?
Yeah, great question. It depends on the individual, obviously, what your training schedule looks like. But that sample program I gave you at the end there, if you did that once a week as one of your sessions, and then you CrossFit 3 times a week, maybe 4, that's absolutely fine. Okay. The goal of that session is completely different to a CrossFit session. I'm not looking for that. We're not doing a strength piece in the Metcon. We're looking to build muscle. So you can fit that in quite easily, and also you could split that up. So it doesn't mean you have to do that session in its entirety. You could take elements. For example, I've just finished my class. I'm going to hit some lat pull downs. I'm going to hit some Bulgarian split squats. All right. Or you could do that before, as a primer, before you do your workout. So there's ways and means you can fit this in, Shona. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, 2 more questions coming in. Great. Joe Chambers, the program that you put up, how often would you suggest that someone to build muscle should do that? There we go. So kind of, yeah, if you wanted to build muscle, okay, that program I've given is more keeping you structurally sound, all right? If you're looking towards more, I mean, you are going to build muscle because you can progressively overload that, all right? So you could either do every time you do it, do more reps, more weight, or both. But if you were really focused on wanting to build muscle, I would recommend moving to a different method of training, all right? So there's plenty of ways to do that. Andrew Hunter, what do you think some of your mistakes have been in the past, i.e. what to avoid? Yeah, I'm trying to try and keep this as succinct as I can. I've made many mistakes in my time, and that's the path of a coach. For me, when I started doing CrossFit, we were starting at a point in time where it was all very new. And obviously the fitness industry had been in a very stagnant place for many years. And then CrossFit came on the scene and completely blew everything open. Now, I came into the mix of definitely massively uninformed. A lot of us didn't really know what we were doing. We were doing workouts that were pretty much ludicrous by today's standards, you know. So a lot of the things that you see now in the programming we do here, we were doing none of that. It was just Metcon after Metcon, hero workouts. And eventually I developed an injury, all right? And that was in my shoulder to start with, and that started to become chronic tendonitis. And being uninformed as I was at the time, I kept basically doing the same thing. And that's what I was telling you about, doing constantly movements up. I was doing no bodybuilding. I had no base level of strength, no posterior chain. Obviously, I'd done some, I had worked out, I was in good shape, but I was lacking key areas in my base building, all right? So then I went to many different seminars. I went to the States. I did one in the UK called Strong Fit Seminar, and pretty much was humbled from the get-go and learned a lot about how to actually develop people from the ground up athletically, but also just giving people good foundations, and then they can go to their sport and, crush it. So yeah, listen to your body. It's amazing what your body will tell you. When you've got an injury, it's amazing. The body's telling you something. It's saying, something wrong here, man. You're not moving well, or there's an issue that needs to be addressed. Okay. And the longer you ignore it, the worse it becomes. And I've done that time and time again, because ego, all that kind of stuff gets involved. But if you want to have longevity in this game and you want to stay training, fit, healthy, all that good stuff that we love, you need to start doing stuff like this on a regular basis, I would say. How do you maintain your mobility with this type of program from someone who has very little? It's an interesting one, Steve, mobility and flexibility. I'm not going to go into too much specifics, but one of the things that I have done over my time to keep my mobility and flexibility is I do a lot of primal-based movement stuff. So I do dead bugs, I do crawls. So I do things with a more functional element to them, but the goal being that I'm focusing on posture, position, and movement quality, okay? So we've done some things here that I put in warm-ups for you guys, and apart from them being for you to get your chili hot, they're also, and very important about, they are also primarily focusing on improving your mobility and your abilities to hold posture and position, okay? So when we're lifting weights, all we're focusing on is maintaining posture and position. That's the goal of lifting weights. Flexibility, on the other hand, lots of people endorse yoga and all that kind of stuff. Personally, I've never done that stuff, okay? I've done little bits of it, and it's just not flowed for me. A lot of people find a lot of merit in yoga and everything else. For me, it's just not been my thing. So it depends, dude, all right? We can have a little more of a discussion if you want. Dan Bond, do you think that lockdown has been good to get us back to basics as we have had limited equipment at home, i.e. lots more bodybuilding type movements? I would 100% agree, Dan. It's because we've been limited in equipment, we have had to be more creative with how we stress people. Okay, so it's very easy to get people in here, put a bar on their back, lift heavy weights. All right, that's how we can create stress. But we can create stress via primal movement patterns and getting people to hold positions better, move better. All right, and then when we come back out of lockdown and into the gym, we're still going to try and continue that thing. We want to see people always move better over lifting weights. Okay, that's always our primary focus here. Sarah, if we just do CrossFit classes, we will be building enough strength in a key area. If we just do CrossFit classes, will we be building enough strength in the key areas to avoid injuries? It's not, yeah, so you will, okay, but primarily it's about movement first. So CrossFit does cover those bases now, but it depends on gym to gym. So as myself, Dan, Sam, all the other coaches here, we've kind of been through that mill. There are a lot of gyms that still primarily focus on that frontal plane and just go heavy CrossFit. We knew a few years ago that we had to change that, and we had to start looking at other ways to keep people fit and healthy because we'd all suffered from these injuries ourselves, all right? So while yes, you will, it will be the sessions which don't look so CrossFit where you might need to attend more, okay? What would be your response to lifting weights, stunts, growth? I'm just going to say bullshit, Ash. to be blank. No, weights doesn't. I've been training a young kid called Ollie. He's since he's about 13, and around about 10, 12, 13, you can start training young kids with weights. All right, and it's amazing what weights do for the development of young people. It's been quite a privilege for me to see the development of him, because what it's shown me is what I was missing at age 15, 16, 17. Having that base level of strength from an early age and having that direction of a coach onto a young person, it's amazing what happens to their long-term athletic development. Sarah, I love the bodybuilding type lessons. They are my favorites. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Any other questions, everybody?
James, I was just going to...
Yes, go on, Waldo.
Quickly. Just touching on something you just said a minute ago, and as kind of CrossFitters and what we see as coaches is members tend to always love the sweat sessions, right? It's why Long Rod Wednesday is always super busy.
Yep.
And when we program something that James looks boring, classes are quieter.
Yeah.
Right? So just bear that in mind if you're sat here thinking, oh, I wouldn't mind adding a little bit of this stuff in, or I could do with doing a little bit of this. And then you're the one to cancel off class when you're not going to get a high heart rate. You're not going to be really sweaty.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the classes you need. And you don't always have to be chasing being led on the floor, dying after every class. There's a time and place for everything. The this is what we see as coaches is, and this is one of the reasons I personally don't like releasing all the workouts, is because people would cherry pick exactly what they like, and we're trying to give you what you need.
Yeah.
And there's a fine balance between that.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't. Yeah, there is a what I call addiction to the Metcon. Is addiction to that feeling of how you feel after a workout. But some of you just did the workout earlier with me. We did that 4 sets. It was hard, right? You were still blowing. You were still getting a lot from it. It's a different stimulus, all right? But understand the context of how it fits into your overall training. If you're primarily focused on just doing, I need to feel, for lack of a better word, fucks after the end of my class, that's not effective training. Effective training allows you to keep coming back repeated times. And you need to do, as Dan said, these sessions that don't look like, well, they look too basic, right? Sexy cells, okay? Last couple of questions, and then I'll let you guys go. If we want to read a bit more about the science behind muscle building that you have mentioned, any particular suggestions? So I would say that for me, a really good guy I started reading, he's not very well known, he's called Mike Mentzer. He's a bodybuilder back in the 70s. This is around the golden era of bodybuilding. There's also Dorian Yates. Okay, now these aren't necessarily scientific. Well, Mike was a very, very intelligent guy. Dorian Yates was not as scientifically read up. There's plenty, Adam, we can talk in person. I can give you some better references, but maybe start there. And then, yeah, when I see you, I'll give you a few more references if you want them. Okay. All right, those are pretty much just general comments. Thank you, people. Oh, okay, last question. No more after this. Speaking as someone who feels they have got a lot stronger over the past 18 months, but would still self-identify as slim, is that an issue around maximum potential for size? Well, Andrew, no, because what I would say is, yeah, Dan just said it, eat more. If you saw those images of myself, okay, you know, I didn't know I could have had that potential to get to where I am now, but because I started eating more and training in an effective way, okay, then I could start to see what my genetic potential held. All right, is that we can talk about this more in person, but I hope that kind of makes sense. All right, people. Excellent. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And yeah, see you in the gym at some point or next week on Zoom.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Good
Bye.
job.
Cheers,
you.
guys.
That was great.
Take it
Bye,
easy.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
Haters.